Praise to the arms which understood little or nothing of what it meant, but welcomed her in without judgment, accepting it all like children might, like God. Accepting it all like children might, like God. Now, have any of you ever slipped on the ice? Yeah, I suspected that, living where we do. Living where we do, everyone slips on the ice sometimes. And it is one of the strangest sensations. The sensation of being momentarily out of control. Free flowing, falling out and down toward the inevitable hard surface that greets us. Now, I took a fall this past Monday on the ice on top of Mount Jackson in New Hampshire, which was having its own winter storm. And it was like any fall, really. Except, and those of you who've been up there will know, except when I looked down, instead of the sidewalk or a frozen puddle or lake, I saw the Highland Center miles below me in Crawford Notch. And then, because Mount Jackson is bald and steep at that point, I had the sensation of rolling and sliding, reaching out to gain purchase on the ice of the ledge and the small cracks in the rock where they weren't entirely yet filled with snow. And none of that worked. So then I landed hard, slammed between a rock and a small snowy bush, somewhere off the trail a bit, and momentarily disoriented. Now, the first thing I did was brush myself off and sit for a moment, absorbing the wind, the cold, and the fabulous view, which you can find on my Instagram feed. So I also did take a picture. I was feeling grateful, thankful to be alive, and relatively uninjured, feeling my own smallness in the midst of the vastness. And then I thought of this poem, which is, in fact, for real, one of my favorites. About the author Lucille Clifton's aunt throwing herself out into traffic and surviving to return to her family and 10-year-old Clifton's embrace. Welcoming her in, accepting it all like children might, like God. Which is to say, welcoming her in with relief, with love, without judgment, and with the spirit and connection of the divine welcome. Now, a slip on the ice, we all know, is not the same sort of act as what Clifton is writing about. But it is a stumble. It's a fall. There's a feeling of helplessness and desperation, and after it, there's sort of a question mark. There's embarrassment, awkwardness, and a kind of pain, a feeling of, were we to be honest, incompetence. A feeling of incompetence for having fallen down. Enough so that on Mount Jackson, as irrational as it might seem, I was momentarily thankful for the extremely high winds so birds could not see me and laugh. And I was happy that though it raised the stakes somewhat, I was the lone human on the mountain that day. While assessing my situation there in the snow next to the rock and the bush, somewhat sore and temporarily turned around, I naturally, like we do in that situation, doled out praise, just like in the poem and just like in our song. Praise to the bush and the rock I slammed into, to the microspikes on my feet, to the beauty around me, which helped me to find my way back to the trail, grateful to be alive and to have yet another chance. When we fall, when we make a mistake that harms a project or a relationship, when we break a rule we have made for ourselves, when we get swept up in the circumstances of life forces, of some kind of gravitational pull, actual or metaphorical, beyond our control. Everything seems like chaos in that moment. And we find ourselves scrambling along the surface, desperate to take hold of something so we can sit and collect ourselves and praise. Now, personally, I find it hard to be grateful in the actual moment of falling, of struggle or pain. Maybe you're one of those rare people who's like, going head over heels. You're like, oh, thank God. But I suspect most of you are the same. But when the moment passes, we then see those hands that lifted us up much more clearly. And we see the sheltered spots that harbored us and the strength of our own determination. The strength of our own determination to make the best of that situation. At Thanksgiving dinner growing up in my house, everyone would hold hands before eating and say what they were grateful for. We kids would desperately try to think of the things that sounded right from the sort of unofficial laundry list of acceptable answers. We knew it shouldn't be items or achievements or social status. For lifting those things up might lead to self-congratulation and the delusion that we are specially blessed over others. So instead, we talked about each other, family, health, love. And of course, because it was my family, and maybe some of you had the same kind, there was the occasional political rant in the formal prayer. But since that time, as I have gotten older, I have found that Thanksgiving, the act of giving thanks, that is, not the day, that giving thanks defies words entirely. Because again, it lies at that moment of acceptance and reflection after the climb and or after the fall. The closest we can get through articulation is with those broad affirmations of our responsive reading today by Jean Pickett. The expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies. But these days I do not think in lists and words so much. Now, this Thanksgiving week feels more like the Advent season that starts next week. Though we may be tired and desperate, and stumbling on the ice and in the wind so much of the time, there is peace, love, joy, and most of all, hope in our lives, within us and around us. Felt, but unarticulated, even in the crisis, and especially in the calm. With the view stretched before us and the wind in our ears. And that is worth being grateful for. So let's take another moment in silence now to sit with that unarticulated gratitude and praise. Blessed be.